Hi there. Welcome back to Normal But Not, the podcast where we peel back the layers of what we've accepted as normal to discover what's really going on underneath. I'm your host, Crystal Centinello, a trauma-informed boundaries and empowerment coach, recovering people pleaser, and unapologetic advocate for living authentically. A little about me: I've spent my life navigating relationships shaped by my people-pleasing tendencies, emotional wounds from growing up in the 80s and 90s, and the effects of emotional abuse. Now I'm here to share what I've learned so you can break free from those patterns too. Before we dive in, I'm so excited to share about my upcoming workshop, From Trauma to Triumph: Setting Boundaries That Transform in 1 hour. It's open for registration if you're ready to stop people-pleasing and start creating guilt-free boundaries that feel empowered and aligned. This workshop is for you. In just 1 hour, I'll walk you through practical, actionable steps to reclaim your power and transform your relationships. You can grab your spot by visiting my website or clicking the link in the show notes. Spaces are limited, so don't wait. This is also our last episode just before we take a break for the holidays. I'll be spending some much needed time with my family, recharging, some self-care, and planning some amazing content for the new year. You can do the same. Send me ideas for content if you don't want to plan it, and or catch up on some of the previous episodes, or check out my Reclaim Your Pleasure podcast during the break. We'll be back in January, ready to dive even deeper into what's normal but not in relationships and life. Today, though, we are tackling a big topic. Is it normal to be drawn to or retreat from grandiose or narcissistic personalities? Okay, so let's start with the basics here. What's grandiosity? All right, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, Bill Eddy. I went down a rabbit hole after listening to him on the Huberman Lab podcast. He's written extensively on high conflict personalities. He describes grandiosity as this inflated sense of self-importance, entitlement, and superiority. Think of it as someone who needs to be the center of attention, demands admiration, and completely ignores others' needs. Now, based on my listenership and my social media following, I see you. Most of you have your hands up when I ask you this question. How many of you have ever dealt with somebody based on that description? Yep, I knew it. That's one of the reasons I decided to talk about this, myself included. Unfortunately, it's very common. And for us as people pleasers, the question is it more common? Is it normal for us to be drawn to these personalities? This other guy I like to talk about, Terry Real, he's a renowned therapist and author. He's known for relational life therapy. He calls this grandiose behavior the "I'm better than you" stance, which is part of what he refers to as narcissistic grandiosity. It's a way to mask deep insecurity through excessive confidence or dominance. And the thing is, oftentimes, and maybe I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but we as people pleasers, or at least what I've grown up with, has been this excuse making for that type of behavior. Oh, but they feel really insecure, so I just need to save them. caretaker much? By the way, this grandiosity isn't just normal but not. It's a survival strategy for narcissists. It's how they protect themselves from the feelings of inadequacy. So there's also this thing where everyone has this feeling of inferiority at some point in their lives. And the normal kind of inferiority is like, ooh, I'm not so great at riding a bike. I'm going to get back up on the bicycle and I'm going to keep trying until I get better. One extreme of that is called an inferiority complex. The inferiority complex is when you're like, I'm never going to be good at it, so I'm just going to give up and I'm never going to try again. A superiority complex tends to be that grandiose narcissistic personality, is someone who maybe never actually does get better at riding the bicycle, doesn't actually get on and try, but because they feel so insecure about it, they walk around telling everybody how great they are at riding a bicycle. Or they make fun of everybody else who rides a bike poorly to make themselves feel better because they ride the bike a little bit better than them. Or whatever else they can do to justify the insecurity they have. Now, the bicycle is just a basic physical example, but you could probably see how it applies to other things in life. Is it normal for people pleasers to be drawn to these personalities, or do we retreat? Unfortunately, it's become normalized for us to be drawn to these personalities, but it's not healthy. Okay, so why is it? Why is it that empaths or codependents or people pleasers, yeah, I'm lumping them all in one, are drawn to these grandiose personalities? This is what Terry Real calls the dance of the codependent and the narcissist. As I mentioned before, he calls it that like grandiose stance or the one-up. So between two people in a relationship, and it doesn't always have to be a romantic relationship, but the type of therapy that he does usually has to do with romantic partners. He will identify in the first session the person who has the one-up stance and the one-down stance. And I'm probably wording it wrong because I'm in the middle of a podcast here, but the person who takes the higher up stance is usually that grandiose personality, and the lower stance is that empathic or people-pleasing personality. So people pleasers have been conditioned to prioritize everyone else's needs above their own. Looking above at the narcissist. And that's all often has been a survival mechanism in childhood. They're craving the validation. And the narcissist craves the admiration. It's toxic, yet magnetic cycle. Did we talk about the magical love kitchen here? That's a very relevant thing that if we haven't talked about it here, we will. And if we did, go back to that episode. Or check it out on Reclaim Your Pleasure. I can't remember anymore. Let's get back to that personal example of the people pleaser who's looking up for the validation and the narcissist who's looking for the admiration. So when I was in a relationship in my early 20s and found myself being a chameleon, morphing into whatever my partner wanted me to be. I mean, like, he loved Disney. He loved everything Disney. And I was like, oh, me too. I'm going to join this charity. By the way, it wasn't the worst thing I did in my life. Like, I was doing great things by being part of this charity. And so easy to justify liking it because of the good things that I was doing with my life. And I was like, I love Disney too. And if he hated a certain type of music, oh my gosh, I hate that music too. That wasn't normal. It was shrinking me to match his grandiosity. And to give you an example of what normal should look like, I was in a relationship later on where I didn't even notice I was being a chameleon. And my partner said to me, "Do you even like that? I feel like you're just agreeing with me to agree. I'd rather you have an opinion." They weren't a narcissist. They didn't need me to have the same opinion as them. They wanted me to have my own opinion. So that narcissistic and people-pleasing relationship, for the people pleaser, the pull towards the narcissism often feels familiar because of our childhood upbringing, especially if you were somebody who grew up with a narcissistic parent. It's like the nervous system is wired to seek that dynamic because it's what is familiar. It's what is known. And oftentimes, we're attracted to somebody that helps us resolve an old childhood wound. Some of you might be listening, thinking, I had a narcissistic parent. And some of you might be like, I have a narcissistic mother. I'm dealing with it now. And a narcissistic father. And you gotta wonder, is there a difference in who you become as an adult if you grew up with a narcissistic mother versus a narcissistic father? So we're going to talk about the roots of these patterns for narcissistic mother wound versus narcissistic father wound. So the narcissistic mother wound, a narcissistic mother, and these can change, the masculine, feminine is fluid. A narcissistic mother, though, often prioritizes her needs above her child's, using guilt, manipulation, or shame to maintain control. Think Jamie Lee Curtis's character in The Bear. Daughters of narcissistic mothers may grow up feeling like they have never been enough, they still aren't enough, and they seek validation in unhealthy relationships. Now, if you are a child with a narcissistic father wound, a narcissistic father may demand perfection or view their child as an extension of their own ego. Sons and daughters with this wound often struggle with self-worth and may either emulate their father's grandiosity, so there's a chance of being narcissistic yourself, or retreat into people-pleasing. Now, again, these roles can be fluid because masculine doesn't always lie with the man and feminine doesn't always lie with the woman. The main difference, mothers tend to use emotional control, while fathers often impose performance-based expectations. Neither is normal, and they leave lasting scars. For example, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble here. Ugh, there's a people pleaser. She's coming out. I can feel her. I have watched one of my daughters bend over backwards to please everyone. And I see the emotional toll it takes on her. She is a high-achieving, high-performing, anxious child with constant stress, constant fear of rejection. And it is heartbreaking. And yeah, from years of being gaslit, I'm like, ooh, is it me? And I'm like, no, it's not me. But I'm not a narcissist. So I do check in and I'm like, hang on. Let me share this story with someone else. Let me get some type of clarity. It's not validation, it's clarity, just to make sure I'm not missing something. Because if it is me, I will make the correction. I'm not always in the other house, so I can't say for sure. But I do know that I 100% put no pressures on the child for good grades. There is even a joke in my house when she's afraid of getting like a conduct referral or a demerit at school of like, I will give you $15 if you get a conduct referral. Just show her that like you're still loved. You can still get rewarded even if you make a mistake. And that is how, as a teacher, I've always like celebrated mistakes with my students because practice makes progress. It is not about perfection. Okay, so you've listened long enough. Crystal, when am I going to get to these actionable steps? I already understand how not normal this is. How do you break free from this toxic dance between the people pleaser and the narcissist? Whether it's my parent or my partner, what do I do? Well, I hope you have your notebook ready, because here we go. Number 1, understand the dynamic. We always talk about awareness first. This time it is an understanding. Recognize this is not normal. It may have happened. It may feel like a pattern for you, but it's not normal. That push and pull of people pleasers and narcissists is rooted in unmet childhood needs. Understand that, and being aware of it is the first step. Number 2, we always come back to it. Set boundaries. It's tough. It's crucial. Start small. Say no when you mean it. If you need help, check out my free cheat sheet. There's actual steps where you can write down words and scripts for setting a boundary without guilt. And if you join my workshop, we'll also be going over those setting boundaries without guilt, taking you out of your trauma, getting you to triumph. Number 3, heal your inner child. Work with a therapist, work with a coach, reparent yourself. Start validating your own feelings and needs instead of seeking external approval. I'm putting out another course later this year, and you'll be learning how to work with your inner child as part, just a piece of the larger course here, getting you back to your authentic self and learning who you are and what you need. So, is it normal to be drawn to or retreat from grandiose personalities? As people pleasers, most of us have been drawn to it. And no, it's not normal, but it's understandable. These dynamics are deeply rooted in our past, but they don't have to define our future. If today's conversation resonated with you, I highly recommend you join my Trauma to Triumph Setting Boundaries That Transform in 1 hour workshop. It's a safe, supportive space where I will help you reframe your guilt, set boundaries that stick, and step into a more confident version of you. You can sign up through the link in the show notes or check out my Instagram at Complete Coaching with Crystal for more updates. Let's make 2025 the year you stop apologizing for being yourself and start living authentically. In the meantime, I've just created a new checklist. Check it out on the website. Again, linked in the show notes. It is, are you stuck in the narcissist people pleaser dance? Discover how to break free. It is a checklist to see if you are stuck and a couple of tips to help you get unstuck. You can find it at crystalsentinello.com/dance. Oh yeah, maybe you can do a little dance when you're free. Thanks for tuning in to Normal But Not. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you after the holidays as we keep redefining what's truly healthy.